Now, as promised, the news in detail. U.S. President Donald Trump has extended federal coronavirus guidelines on social distancing until April 30th. Trump's decision came after the death toll in hard-hit New York State passed 1,000. Meanwhile, the global number of confirmed cases has jumped to over 724,000, with over 34,000 deaths. More on that now in this report.
The rapid increase in the number of coronavirus cases has put governments in a continuous pressure to contain the disease. The finance minister in the German state of Hesse committed suicide after being deeply worried over the economic impact of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the White House coronavirus response coordinator has urged governors and mayors to prepare for a surge in infection cases.
We're asking every single governor and every single mayor to prepare like New York is preparing now. Know where every hospital is, public, private. Know where every one of your surgical centers are. That's where your anesthesia ventilators are. Know how to change those anesthesia ventilators up to supportive ventilators to take care of people. Know where every piece of equipment is in the state. Know how to move that around the state based on need.
China's National Health Commission says imported cases in the country are increasing, but the local transmission has been contained.
As of March 28, the number of current known cases have decreased below 3,000, and the transmission on the Chinese mainland have been basically contained. Under this circumstance, all Chinese regions should continue to focus on guarding against the double risks of sporadic and imported infections and work to control the disease in a timely, quick, and accurate manner.
Spain, one of the hardest hit countries, has received a military plane with a shipment of health supplies from the Czech Republic amid the pandemic.
Well, India, China, France, Italy, and the UK have implemented the world's largest and most restrictive mass quarantines. More on that now in this report.
Over a third of the planet's population is under some form of a lockdown. Governments have banned mass gatherings, congregations, and extended stay-at-home guidelines as the pandemic continues to spread. Russia has locked down Moscow, while UK's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Jenny Harry says restrictive measures may last for 6 months or even more.
So I think 3 weeks for review, 2 or 3 months to see whether we've really squashed it, but about 3 to 6 months ideally, and lots of uncertainty in that, but then to see at which point we can actually get back to normal. And it is plausible that it could go further than that. We just need to wait to see how successful we've been.
In Africa, Nigeria ordered a 14-day cessation of movement in Lagos and Abuja to contain the spread of the virus. President Donald Trump's refusal to impose a lockdown has been met with widespread national criticism, as many believe it led to the exponential spread. But Trump insists he has done a very good job.
So you're talking about 2.2 million deaths, 2.2 million people from this. And so if we could hold that down, as we're saying, to 100,000, it's a horrible number. Maybe even less, but to 100,000. So we have between 100 and 200,000. We all together have done a very good job.
In India, an unplanned, sudden, and poorly executed countrywide curfew has triggered a mass exodus and has led to the deaths of migrant workers from the cities. Experts say the abrupt lockdown has amplified the risk of spreading the disease.
Well, the UK's top epidemiologist, Professor Neil Ferguson, says the coronavirus antibody tests will be ready in days. Professor Ferguson says only 2 to 3% of the UK's population has been infected. He said almost 40% did not get any symptoms at all. Ferguson says antibody tests are in the final stage of validation. Meanwhile, in Australia, a vaccine for tuberculosis is being given to healthcare workers to see if it guards against COVID-19. The World Health Organization says it is important to know whether the Bacillus calmette-guerin shot used to cure TB can reduce coronavirus. The WHO is encouraging international groups to collaborate with the head of infectious diseases research in Melbourne, Nigel Curtis, who is leading the study. In Pakistan, highways across the country will remain open to ensure the transport of food and goods amid the coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Imran Khan took that decision after provincial governments imposed a lockdown. The government will also increase the number of freight trains to avert a shortage of food and other essential supplies. Meanwhile, the Health Ministry has reported 1,625 infections with 18 deaths so far across the country. The ministry said 28 people have recovered from the deadly virus. It said 45 cases of infections have been reported since yesterday, while 11 patients are in critical condition. The data shows 508 infections in Sindh, 593 in Punjab, 144 in Balochistan, 195 in KP, 128 in Gilgit-Baltistan, and 51 in the capital Islamabad. Afghanistan's government says Taliban prisoner release scheduled for tomorrow will not happen. In the Doha peace deal, the U.S. assured the release of 5,000 Taliban prisoners before intra-Afghan talks. National Security Council spokesperson Javed Faisal says the Taliban agreed to send a team to Kabul to hold further technical discussions. Kabul officials and the fighters held a video conference yesterday in which the decision was reached. Officials say talks were held in the presence of officials from the U.S. Embassy, Qatar's Foreign Ministry, and Red Cross officials. They said the Afghan government will host the Taliban at Bagram City for the next dialogue. Kabul says 19 security personnel have been killed and 6 others wounded in Taliban attacks in Afghanistan's Zabul and Takhar provinces. Police say the fighters targeted posts in Khwajagar and Arghandab districts. State police said the policemen were wounded in the ambush in Takhar as forces retaliated against the fighters. Meanwhile, the Zabul governor told media the attack was carried out by a Taliban infiltrator last night. The Afghan Ministry of Defense says the Taliban also suffered casualties in Zabul but did not provide an exact figure. The Taliban have not yet claimed responsibility for the attacks. In Afghanistan, a group of volunteers has disinfected shops, vehicles, and streets in Kabul with hopes of stopping the spread of coronavirus. The group is supported by a few Afghan private companies. More on that now in this report.
On Saturday, the government ordered all shops, restaurants, mosques, and public transport in capital Kabul to close until further notice. Many volunteers have stepped up to join the fight against spread of the disease wreaking havoc worldwide. They have also requested the beleaguered Kabul government for its support.
We have volunteered to disinfect all the public places from the threat of the virus. We ask the government and especially the Public Health Ministry to support and provide the equipment to all the organizations working in this field so they can continue the combat against the virus.
Afghan Health Ministry said there are 110 confirmed cases of COVID-19 with 5 deaths so far. There are fears that Afghanistan's health system, devastated by years of war, would be overwhelmed by an outbreak. But residents in Kabul breathed a sigh of relief and appreciated volunteers' efforts towards disinfection.
I appreciate this measure carried out by these men to disinfect the city from the virus. These types of actions will keep us safe from the virus.
Officials say an overwhelming majority of cases are linked to neighboring Iran amid the sudden return of thousands of refugees. The authorities have warned that the spread of the virus in capital would put over 5 million at risk.
In India, 17 migrant workers and their family members have died while struggling to return home amid the countrywide lockdown. This comes after Prime Minister Narendra Modi imposed a sudden 21-day lockdown to contain the spread of the new coronavirus. Medics say they died of exhaustion, fatigue, and road accidents in different parts of the country. In Rajasthan, thousands of migrant workers from various industries have been abandoned by their employers. The workers were left without food and later shunted from one bus station to another for transport. Meanwhile, the central government has directed the states to close their borders to stop the migrants' long walk home. Iran has accused the U.S. of waging medical terrorism against the country amid the coronavirus pandemic. In a tweet, Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said the world community must stop aiding war crimes and obeying illegal U.S. sanctions. Zarif said the U.S. has gone from sabotage and assassinations to waging an economic war and economic terrorism on Iranians. He said this even exceeds what would be permissible on the battlefield. Meanwhile, President Hassan Rouhani has also criticized the curve, saying it is not the time for political war. He hailed Iran's handling of the novel coronavirus, saying the disease has cemented national unity. Iran has so far reported 2,640 deaths and over 38,000 infections due to the deadly virus. In Iraq, the U.S.-led coalition has withdrawn from a military base in Kirkuk as part of a reduction of foreign troops in the country. In a statement, the coalition said over 300 soldiers have departed the base. It said the equipment, which is worth over $1 million, has also been transferred to the Iraqis. The K-1 Air Base is the third site coalition forces have handed over to the Iraqi military this month. The base has hosted coalition forces since 2017 to launch operations against ISIS in nearby mountainous areas. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Yemen's Houthi rebels say they will continue to target Saudi cities in response to the coalition's continued aggression. National Delegation Head Mohammed Abdul Salam said yesterday's strikes on Saudi targets were an act of self-defense. Abdul Salam said the coalition will have to stop the offensive and lift the siege against Houthis if they want a ceasefire. He said the explicit declaration to end aggression is the solution. This comes after Houthis accused the Saudi-led coalition of carrying out airstrikes in Yemen's Hajjah city. Yesterday, Saudi Arabia intercepted 2 ballistic missiles fired by the rebels over Riyadh and Jizan. U.S.-backed Syrian Democratic Forces say ISIS prisoners have seized control of the ground floor of a major prison in northeastern Syria. SDF spokesperson Mustafa Bali said some prisoners managed to escape after removing the internal walls of Hasakah prison. Bali said they have sent anti-terror forces and additional troops to control the situation. The U.S.-led coalition spokesperson, Colonel Miles Kaggans, said the prison holds low-level ISIS fighters. Kaggans said the coalition is assisting SDF with aerial surveillance. Earlier, Syrian state television said 12 ISIS militants fled from the prison towards the southern outskirts of Hasakah. Syria has reported its first death due to the new coronavirus. The country has so far confirmed only 5 cases, but medics believe there are more infections. The woman died while being rushed to hospital for emergency treatment. She was later diagnosed to have been infected by COVID-19. Officials have denied a cover-up of the disease, but have imposed a lockdown as well to stem the pandemic. Infections from the virus have yet to be recorded in the opposition-held northwest and other parts of Syria outside regime control. The United Nations has warned that the coronavirus spike can cause a total collapse of Gaza's healthcare system. The UN coordinator for the Palestinian territories, Jamie McGoldrick, says local facilities cannot deal with the large number of cases. McGoldrick said there are only 60 ventilators in the Gaza Strip for all medical emergencies among the population of 2 million. The UN has allocated $34 million for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza to cover a 90-day period. The total number of infections in Palestine has reached 109, with 1 death. In Libya, fighting continues even as 5 more COVID-19 cases increase the total to 8. The National Center for Disease Control said the new cases were in the northwestern city of Misrata. Misrata is held by the government of National Accord, which is at war with the Libyan National Army of Eastern-based commander Khalifa Haftar. The conflict escalated last week when pro-GNA fighters increased assaults on several fronts with clashes, bombardments, and airstrikes. The UN has urged warring parties to stop fighting so the overstretched health system can prepare. In chaos and without central authority since 2011, Libya is poorly placed to withstand any pandemic. A governor in Somalia's Puntland has been killed in a suicide bombing by the Al-Shabaab militant group. Police say Abdisalan Hassan Hirsi, governor of Nugal region, succumbed to his injuries after being rushed to hospital. Police said the governor died less than an hour after being admitted to the intensive care ward. It said a former police commander and a civilian were also wounded in the blast and were being treated. Witnesses say the attacker ran towards the governor's vehicle before detonating his suicide vest. In a statement, Al-Shabaab militant group has claimed responsibility for the attack. Polls have closed in Mali's long-delayed parliamentary elections, which were held despite concerns about security and the coronavirus pandemic. The vote was held despite the abduction of the main opposition leader, Soumaïla Cissé, by unidentified gunmen. The government's election spokesperson, Amini Belko Maiga, said voting conditions were not ideal, but they had to go through with it. A second round is scheduled for April 19th. The vote will elect new MPs to the 147-seat National Assembly for the first time since 2013. President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's Rally for Mali party won a substantial majority in the 2013 polls and remains in government since then. The country has been plagued by conflict since 2012, when rebels captured much of Mali's arid north. North Korea says it has successfully tested super-large multiple rocket launchers. State media said yesterday's test was aimed at verifying strategic and technical features of the launchers. State media KCNA did not give details about the weapon or the site of the launch. It quoted authorities saying the deployment of the weapon system is crucial for national defense. Yesterday, the South Korean military said the North fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea. It said the missiles were fired from the coastal city of Wonsan, flying 230 kilometers with a maximum altitude of 30 kilometers. The rocket launch marks the North's 4th major weapons test this month. President Donald Trump says the U.S. will not foot the bill for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's security. Trump's announcement follows reports of the couple's arrival in Los Angeles, California. In a tweet, Trump said he is a great friend and admirer of the Queen and the UK, but the couple will have to pay for their own security. In a statement, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex said they had no plans to ask for publicly funded protection during their stay in the U.S. Last month, Canada announced it would stop providing security assistance to the family in keeping with their change in status. France continues to evacuate critically ill coronavirus patients from the hard-hit east of the country to neighboring Germany. The evacuations are part of an effort to free up space as the pandemic worsens. The French Defense Ministry said 2 patients were airlifted from Strasbourg to Ulm in southern Germany. It said 2 others were sent from Metz to Essen in the west in a French helicopter. Paris has praised the evacuations as an example of European solidarity amid divisions between other EU members. On Saturday, the French army began evacuations as part of President Emmanuel Macron's new mission dubbed Resilience. Stock markets across Europe are trading lower as the coronavirus pandemic continues to rattle investor confidence. Regional stocks have witnessed a volatile session as stimulus measures fail to attract stability amid calls for an extended lockdown. London's FTSE 100 is trading over 1.5% lower. The British cinema chain Cineworld stocks plunged over 15%, while aerospace firm Meggitt and Rolls-Royce stocks shed over 11% each. The CAC 40 in Paris has lost over 1.5%, while Frankfurt's DAX is trading fractionally lower. In Asia, the Nikkei 225 led the losses, closing over 1.5% as shares of index heavyweight SoftBank Group dropped about 5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng lost over 1%, while the Shanghai Composite closed nearly 1% lower. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil prices have lost over 6% amid the price war. Most Middle Eastern stock markets have dropped after the S&P Global Ratings cut Kuwait government's credit rating. The Bursa Kuwait Premier Market Price Index lost nearly 5%. The shares of the National Bank of Kuwait and Ahli United Bank dived over 4%. The indices of Saudi Arabia's Tadawul, Nasdaq Dubai, and Abu Dhabi's ADX traded marginally higher. But the indices of Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, and Egypt fell nearly 2%. Time to find out what the weather is like around the world. There you have it. You're all caught up. For the latest updates, of course, on these and other stories, you can always follow us on social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching this bulletin.